All right. Good afternoon to our friends here on the East Coast and good morning to the rest of the country. This is Anthony Mento. I appreciate you tuning in. Um, Today is let's call it part two from a prior webinar we did in partnership with North American and Ed Slott. And why we thought this was relevant and actionable is because it was our best attended. It was our most requested follow-up. It produced the most activity, post-webinar activity of all the webinars we've been doing consistently since COVID or even pre-COVID, but we really started to ramp our online presence throughout COVID when agents were kind of not in the office and at home and we were all locked down and needed to build our virtual presence. Um, so what I thought would be fun to do is to walk through a real case study, recap like how are we messaging? Why do we dive into this segment of planning? Why has it been so effective? And really get into like a single case that can be used over and over and over again in your practice, and using a strategy with a spend down, some tools like Holistic Plan, which is an AI-based tax return analyzer, and Wealthy and Wise, which is a tried and true software program that dates all the way back into the 80s, um, to drive outcomes. And what I'll do now is just kind of share my screen and walk you through some of the takeaways and the sound bites that we've been applying since the Ed Slott presentation. You'll call it maybe a month or so ago. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and start my slideshow, and we will get to work. Bear with me for a moment. From the beginning. Right. Share the slides. Okay, that should be working. There we go. Okay. So where we started was what is the 2025 IRA revolution, and how did the One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025 kind of create opportunities? Um, what I would like to share is that as an industry, right, we have to figure out where we're going. And there's some headwinds that we are facing. So it is arguably a time to open up your playbook and retool your practice and get proficient in areas that you may not have been so proficient in. Um, so I start with headwind number one. Yeah, years ago, like the replacement business was booming from the GUL years, right? We went from illustrating 10 and 12% IRR on, target premium funded variable life contracts, or, showing vulnerability to whole life that was, sold in an 8% dividend environment and supposed to offset in 11 years, now offsetting in 20. And the industry response was, well, let's just flip it into GUL. We went complete opposite end of the spectrum. Um, with interest rates being so low for so long, the GUL market has changed considerably, right? Carriers couldn't reserve so much capital for these guarantee element instruments, and have that capital in reserve sit and earn a point and a half or 2 point interest. 10-year treasury was really at an all-time low, and then further, exacerbated by COVID. We see an exemption of $30 million, right? The One Big Beautiful Bill has pushed the ultra high net worth marketplace even to an ultra higher net worth marketplace, right? We we have a lot of folks who kind of stay under that exemption. 30 million, of course, is married filing jointly. And we don't see that rolling back at any time soon. Um, Interest rates are high. So, although firms like ours were not dependent on premium finance or private financing, they were nice deals to come in, at a higher volume and scale than they are today. Um, and then we had this craze of annuity sales, right? Annuity rates went up so fast that it was a no-brainer, right, to move money into 6% MIGAs. And now that business has stabilized and the pricing models have stabilized, um, that's present some changes to how we approach. Bear with me, I'm just going to change to presenter view. Thank you, Henry, for making me aware. So where do we go from here? And where is the opportunity? And that's where I wanted to spend some time today. And this will be a relatively quick webinar, but I think it'll be action-packed and informative. Um, Time is ticking to lock in historically low tax rates. And when you're thinking about qualified money, we always talk about RMDs, the required minimum distributions, but Ed's message was to think about the maximum. Let the tax planning drive the distribution planning. Don't let government tables drive the distribution planning, right? We've always been mindful of what's the least amount, what's the RMD, how do I take money out? No, no. Let's actually let's go on offense and let's talk about how the tax planning and the opportunities we have at our disposal today using the one big beautiful bill should drive the distribution planning. So, one thing that always stuck with me, and I've been following Ed for better part of 2 decades, is that you always pay taxes at the lowest rates. You always pay taxes at the lowest rates. So, when you're thinking about maximum, you want to take advantage of voluntary distributions, right? Pay taxes at the lowest rate when you want to, not before they're required. So, what am I talking about? Well, if you have the minimum mentality, you're only taking what is required, likely resulting in more long-term taxes paid. Whereby if you start to adopt the maximum mentality, you want to use up the lower brackets every year and not waste them. So just like annual exclusions and annual benefits that we are afforded in a given tax year, um, the depth and the de minimis amounts of these brackets are really the opportunity. So if you miss on taking advantage of these lower brackets in year 2025, you've lost that forever, resulting in a larger tax bill at likely higher rates, because this is arguably one of, if not the very best time to ever pay ordinary income. So we want to shift your thinking. How much can be withdrawn each year while using these lower brackets? Let me maximize the 12% bracket. Let me maximize the 22% bracket. Let me maximize the 24% bracket. And the case study I'm about to share with you will show exactly how we've been able to demonstrate that to a client. So if you look at the history of the top federal income tax rate by year, um, you're going to see that 37% is fairly generous, right? We've seen as high as 94%. We were in the 70% range back in the 70s. And then we've kind of normalized since 1985 and hovered anywhere between 31 and 40. What is different this go around is that the brackets are so large, particularly for married filing jointly. The 24% bracket in 2025 for married filing jointly can go up to $394,000 of income. Now, we've never really seen that. So, although we think inflation is a bad thing, right, and it usually is a problem, um, when it comes to tax planning, it creates the opportunity. So, right, think inflation good for tax planning. So, the new bill has extended the major tax cuts permanently. So more income can now pass through the lower brackets than ever before. So if you look at the comparative of just this 24% bracket, which I really believe is the sweet spot here, um, from 2005 to 2017, this income band mostly lived in a 33% bracket. So the fact that it's now 24 tells you that income taxes are, let's call it, on sale, as Ed says, with a 9% discount. Since some years they've been at 35. Now, we're in the midst of a government shutdown. We're in the midst of a $38 trillion deficit, and I think it's really hard to believe that tax rates are going to go down from here, right? They're certainly going to live in this range for a little while, and inevitably have to go back up. So reminder of paying taxes at the lowest rates. So, is it that big of a deal? I would say yes. And with the help of my friend, Chat GPT, I'm showing you that through 2005, that $394,000 ordinary income bracket typically lived in the 33% range, as high as 35, but this anomaly here is in a 24, where you see in 2025, um, we have a pretty wide income band to stay in that 24% bracket. So let me pause there, and I'm going to walk you through a case study where I think the math is going to start making sense. You're going to have that aha moment where you're going to see the opportunity, and then I'll introduce a couple tools that we've been using to help you. So male age 60, female age 60, and I'm only addressing the federal tax bracket right now. Um, Gross ordinary income of 279,000. So, right, you don't have to be a gazillionaire to do planning in this space. 279,900 with a standard deduction of 29.9, we have taxable income of 250,000. So in this case study, they did not need or want the IRA to live on and support their retirement. They have other assets, some pensions, savings, and the qualified money was just going to push their income tax bracket, and they just weren't interested. Now, if they did want the IRA to live on, this conversation shifts to a potential Roth conversion, but that's not the spirit of today's case study. The case study today is to showcase that in the $250,000 taxable income range, they have exceeded the 24% bracket, right? They're in the 24, I'm sorry, they're in it. They haven't exceeded, they've exceeded the 22% bracket. So they're $48,000 above the start of the 24% bracket, which starts at 201,000. But here's the opportunity. The 24% bracket goes all the way up to $394,000. So they're sitting in this 250 range, and there's a lot of room here. So the room remaining in the 24% bracket per se, right? It's 394 minus their ordinary income of 250. It's 144,600 left on the table, right? Ed says, don't let it go, because if you lose it, you lose it forever. So they can add up to $144,000 more in taxable income before crossing into the 32% bracket. So, all right, this sounds like a lot of math. It sounds complicated, but no, it doesn't have to be. We are using a tool where if you will provide us or anyone on our sales and marketing team a copy of the client's tax return, the system will analyze it for you, tell you what bracket you're in, tell you the marginal bracket you're in, and tell you how much is left in the current tax bracket. So in this particular client, we identified $144,000 was still unused in the 24% bracket. So, all right, what do we do? Well, first you have to kind of show them where they're at today. So I'll push this out to all of the attendees, and basically we're just making some assumptions that the asset's going to grow at qualified assets going to grow at 6%. You're going to take the required minimum, which is the typical strategy. They're going to pay a small asset management fee, and you're going to reinvest the after-tax RMDs into a non-qualified brokerage account, right? That's what everyone says they're going to do. Option two, and what we're suggesting is that you take the maximum drawdown you can from the qualified plan without pushing yourself into the 32% bracket. So remember, we had 144,000 we can take and spend down in the qualified plan and still pay tax at the lowest bracket of 24%, right? Lowest bracket meaning that particular client in today's environment. They will likely be in a higher tax bracket later. And what we found in analyzing every way from Sunday is that you take those taxable dollars, stay within the 24% bracket, recognize your income tax, and then deploy the after-tax amount into a cash value rich policy with an increasing cash and increasing death benefit. The level strategy typically doesn't work if you have longevity in the family and you plan on living to age 90 or beyond, because the reinvested RMD will typically surpass it. So you want to buy a policy that aligns with the asset class of your traditional IRA. If you're in all equities, maybe you want to buy a VUL. If you're in a blended portfolio, maybe you want to buy an IUL. If you're in a fixed income, maybe you want to buy a whole life. But in any event, the policy type doesn't matter as long as you're matching the asset class. So I'm just going to give you some quick math. This is the policy that this particular agent wanted to present to the client. So the net after-tax dollars of the distribution, the allowable distribution that kept us in the 24% bracket was 96,436. We built an increasing death benefit type structure, and you see the death benefit starts off at like 970,000 and grows all the way to 3.7 million, assuming a 6% crediting rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here, and I'm actually going to share with you the PDF output in the software tools that we have been using. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm going to walk you through this really quickly. Okay, so here's your wealthy and wise analysis. You have $1 million in retirement plan assets. We're assuming you're in a pre-retirement tax bracket of 24. You're in an after retirement tax bracket of 37. The growth rate is 4.2%, which is a 6% gross, minus some capital gains. And here you are riding this thing out. You have a 37% problem from day one because your kids are going to inherit the IRA. It's going to be forced out within 10 years, and they're going to be pushed into the highest marginal tax bracket. I assume the kids are in a 37% bracket, which is arguably very low, considering they're going to have to empty this account in year 10, years following date of death, and then end up in the largest bracket. You'll see how we work the RMDs, reinvesting and deploying them into a non-qualified brokerage account, versus here's your policy that we're looking to create. We're going to take 126. Remember, I had up to 124. I had up to we had up to 144 to still stay in a 24% bracket. Take 126. I didn't need all 144 in this particular example. So 126 is less than 144, stayed in the 24% bracket. Recognize income of $30,000 and the after-tax amount is 96,436. That's how we arrived at the policy values. Here we have the maximum drawdown, and what you're going to see in Wealthy and Wise is that the 126 is coming out, we're spending it down, we're paying income taxes, and the qualified plan asset is dwindling down to next to nothing by the 10th year. 10 pay prop policy, spend down over 10 years. If I look at the outcomes, you will see, particularly in this wealth to heirs column, at life expectancy age 89, it's a $3.8 million outcome versus $4.6 million outcome. And that's if tax rates stay the same. If tax rates move against us, this is going to be an even larger disparity in the wealth to heirs. So as far as tax planning and opportunities in the one big beautiful bill, what we're finding is that you need to maximize every dollar you can in the low in these brackets that have such a large band, much larger than we've ever seen before, and take advantage of paying taxes in the lowest bracket. Now I'm going to share one additional bonus idea. That was the traditional spend down. It's very simple. All you're doing is taking maximum distributions versus minimum. You're locking in your tax rate and you're managing to the bracket. There's a bonus idea and a strategy that we've been utilizing called the retirement tax minimization strategy. In this instance, the IRA is repositioned into a tax qualified defined contribution plan. There's some rules around that. Consulting, part-time work, right? The legitimate business purpose can adopt a tax qualified defined contribution plan. This particular client has some real estate. They set up a real estate LLC. They're managing the real estate in the LLC. So we can then adopt a qualified plan. Inside that qualified plan, I'm allowed to acquire and fund a life insurance policy. So instead of taking distributions, we're buying the policy inside the qualified plan. We're going to reposition that policy to personal ownership or to a grantor trust at some point in the future. So, right, this kind of steps away or allows you to maximize those brackets in other areas. Maybe it is in conjunction with Roth conversion, but I don't need the spend down method to acquire this policy. I'm using the qualified assets to acquire this policy. So, what we're doing is we're looking to take the $1 million qualified asset and go out and purchase this $3 million universal life policy. And this is an example with John Hancock, but any policy that any carrier who allows the sale of life insurance inside a qualified plan is certainly doable. You see, we use the entire IRA balance over 5 years, and we have a fully paid up policy by year 5 of worth $3 million. Now, there's a couple movements we need to make. You'll see the IRA was moved into qualified status, right? We acquired a $3 million policy. We also gifted $350,000 or loaned $350,000 to a trust. We're putting the trust in a position to buy the life insurance policy from the qualified plan once it's fully paid up. So in the example I shared with you, we were fully paid up at the end of year 5. The $350,000 transfer that's moved to trust at a reasonable interest growth rate assumption grows to $427,000. At $427,000, that happens to be the fair market value of the policy at the end of the 5th year. So at the end of the 5th year, the trust will give the qualified plan $427,000 of cash, and the qualified plan will give the trust a fully paid up $3 million universal life policy. So it is a reposition to a grantor trust for a swap, right? Swapping cash into the qualified plan to reposition the policy out of the plan, described in PT 92.6 and Revenue Procedure 2005-25. So there are options. If you have identified clients who have leaving money meaning they do not need or want RMDs in retirement, to manage those qualified assets, reposition them into after-tax assets while staying in these historically low income tax brackets. Um, Really big opportunity. We think that with some very limited fact finding, like clients' insurability, um, qualified assets, grab a tax return, 2023, 2024, let us analyze for you, provide you some output. We can utilize these strategies in selling accumulation type products for the purpose of wealth transfer and overcome some of these headwinds that we faced, right? I've heard over and over and over again, $30 million exemptions killing me. Well, there is the silver lining here is that the one big beautiful bill did change some things for the better in our business, and there are plenty of opportunities to manage income tax brackets, and we sell some of the most tax efficient products in the entire financial service industry. So here I am, 1227. We will send out copies of these slides. I'm gonna stop sharing at this point and just kind of walk you through the recap here. I will send out copies of the slides, copies of the case design work in Wealthy and Wise. If you happen to have clients' tax returns or have some facts on hand that you would like us to analyze, I'd be happy to analyze this. Um, I did get some questions here. CPAs are on board or not on board with this maximum in life insurance. I think it's all math. I think it's all math, and Holistic Plan and the Wealthy and Wise will prove out that math to get us to the optimal outcomes. Um, so again, I want to thank you for being with us. We will send out copies of these slides, copies of the PDF output, and a fact finder in the event that you want to run a client through the system or even analyze a tax return. We'd be happy to do so for you as part of our value add as a BGA. And we just want to thank you for attending today. I appreciate your questions, your commentary. I think we've answered everything up through this point. I wish you a terrific fourth quarter. Now's the time to be looking at these planning opportunities. Everyone is mindful of taxes and where they're at this point in time. And this is a wonderful speaking point to ingratiate yourselves with CPAs and other centers of influence. So thank you and be well.